White governments don't want intelligent, critical thinking black populations. They instead only want black populations that are just smart enough to work, pay taxes, fill up their sporting arenas, and fight within their unjust wars. But that can be made to believe many things that literally insults our own intelligence. Our core problem is that the ignorant ones are stubbornly ignorant of their own ignorance. And therefore they fight against the intelligent ones that are trying to teach them the truth that is necessary in order to truly liberate ourselves. Therefore, the intelligent ones remain silent. But when we remain silent in the face of black ignorance, we are in fact aiding the white oppressors and continuing their mental enslavement of our people. We must therefore speak the truth, even if it angers the ignorant ones. It's better to lose black ignorant friends for speaking the black liberating truth than to endorse ignorant false beliefs in order to hold on to ignorant, mentally enslaved black friends. Because the truth must prevail if we are ever going to liberate ourselves. Because if our beliefs are flawed, then all of our liberating remedies and strategies that stem from those false beliefs will also be flawed. Therefore, I will not be silenced in the face of black ignorance when it's black ignorance that prevents our liberation. Those who know the truth must teach. African proverb. The following are absolute facts. Don't reject facts that you can easily research and prove for yourselves in order to hold on to lies that you've been misled to believe. Doing so will keep you mentally enslaved by what oppressive forces. The absolute truth are that Willie Lynch never existed. The letter was actually written by Dr. Corbina Ashanti in 1970. That's why it appears so accurate. This is also why when experts examined the literature, they found that it contained modern words that were not used during the 1712 date which the letter was allegedly written. The minds of black people are not being programmed by silly slave syndrome myth. That silly myth presents what would in fact be the least plausible scenario for controlling millions of people down generational lines. It's simply not how true brainwashing is achieved. The truth of our plight and condition is that the collective minds of black people have been manipulated to think in ways serving the white society. There are 4 ways to effectively manipulate the human brain: by what we are taught, by what we see, by what we hear, and through repetition. Because the white society controls the education we are taught, the media images that we see, and the narratives that we repetitively hear, white social scientists and white propagandists have manipulated the collective minds of millions of black people to think in ways that are against our own self-interest and that instead serves the interests of their white society. They first began brainwashing us during our early education and development, when our minds are young and most impressionable. They do this by denying us of virtually all black racially affirming facts about ourselves. Doing so conditions us to perceive ourselves through a false, inherent inferior identity that psychologically assigns us to a subordinate status within the white dominant society. They also brainwashes us through unrelenting media subliminal programming. Media subliminal programming are messages embedded in the media that are designed to bypass the conscious mind and become embedded into subconscious minds of targeted audiences. It's the true reason why millions of black people are now self-loathing, perceives ourselves as being our own worst enemies, and reveres Caucasians in spite of a brutally horrific history of the contrary. Regardless of how intelligent people are, If it's possible to control the input into the human mind, it's entirely possible to control what people will believe. The white society has exploited its monopoly over the input that are systematically and repetitively being fed into the collective minds of Black people to manipulate us who think in ways benefiting the white society. It's the truth of our collective condition. Willie Lynch is a myth. Jesus is also a myth created by the Roman Emperor Constantine and the councils of bishops in the year 325 AD. The creation of the Jesus Messiah myth was an ingenious scheme that gave the church immensely greater power, because by creating the Jesus myth, more specifically that people have to go through Jesus to enter heaven, this means that the church literally holds the one and only key into heaven. This gives the church immense power on earth. Jesus is a myth that was added to the Bible by Emperor Constantine. This is why Emperor Constantine himself refused to accept Jesus as his savior even while upon his deathbed. He died in the year 337 AD without doing so. After he died, Bishop Eurybus of Nicomedia then baptized him and declared him a Christian, which totally contradicts the Bible's ideology that one would have to accept Jesus in life in order to enter heaven. Now think, just as it would be foolish to accept a meal prepared by a chef who refused to eat his own cooking, even in the face of death, likewise, it's foolish to accept a religion wherein which the person in charge of creating the religion himself refused to accept Jesus, even in the face of death. The early white Christians' conversion of Africans into their religion had absolutely nothing to do whatsoever with saving the souls of Africans so that we Africans may join them in heaven during the afterlife. This is an irrefutable fact because the early white Christians literally believed that Africans weren't humans, that Africans had no souls, and that heaven was for whites only. In fact, the early white Christians believed that the thought of an African entering a heaven was as ridiculous as a dog doing so. This is an absolute fact. When we logically look at facts as they truly were, we can say with 100% certainty that the white enslavers' conversion of Africans into their religion had absolutely nothing to do with saving the souls of Africans. There was another self-serving reason why they put their time and energy into teaching Christianity to a people they otherwise treated so brutally. The self-serving reason was to indoctrinate the belief of a white God into their subconscious minds. Indoctrinating the belief of a white God into the subconscious minds of Black people creates a profound adoration towards whiteness within their minds. This then transposes onto white people. This made the Africans more compliant with white dominance over our lives. It made them into better slaves, and it aided in the colonizing of Africa. Many Black Christians attempt to defend their religion by claiming that it was first practiced in Ethiopia and that therefore it's actually the religion of we Africans. It is untrue that Christianity was first practiced in Ethiopia. Christianity did not reach Ethiopia until the year 341 AD under the reign of King Ezana. That's 16 years after the Romans created the false religion. Moreover, the fact that the Bible strongly supports slavery and was written by Romans that routinely engaged in massive orgies and death sports totally disqualifies it from being truly of God. Furthermore, the belief that a Bible written by history's proven most ungodliest group contained the true words of God and that was brutally beaten into submission within the blood-soaked minds of our enslaved ancestors will now set us free are both idiotic beliefs. They've got our people's minds so dumbed down and mentally enslaved that stating facts now literally offends millions. The human brain is the world's greatest computer because it is self-aware, self-formulating, self-learning, and it can even reprogram itself. Why would God implant such a great ability into our heads and then give us a religion that discourages intelligent critical thinking in exchange for blind dumb faith? The human brain's capabilities are a direct contradiction of the limits that religion imposes upon it. There's even more. The most idiotic beliefs that millions of African Americans have been misled to believe by white propagandists is that we African Americans made the N-word ours and that using the N-word now empowers us. Those who believe these two statements to be true does so because they are in fact ignorant. Whenever people are ignorant, they'll always believe nonsense. Even things that literally insults their own intelligence. Both of those statements are in fact the opposite of the truth. We were in fact socialized to call ourselves by the N-word by white oppressive forces, utilizing the covert science of negative media social engineering. Those who control a people's media images are able to negatively steer their culture because people often imitate those derogatory media depictions of themselves that they've accepted as being their reality. It was through white-produced black exploitation films in which black actors were hired to repeatedly call themselves by the N-word that African Americans were socially engineered to self-identify ourselves by the N-word. We imitated the behavior after repeatedly seeing it being depicted by our groups within movies. Self-identifying ourselves by the N-word actually psychologically damages us because words, when repeated often enough, have power over the subconscious mind. Self-identifying ourselves by the N-word actually conditions us to perceive ourselves through a false inherent subordinate identity that psychologically assigns us to a subordinate status within the white dominant society. The N-word programming is now being reinforced through the white controlled hip hop industry. As long as we continue to call ourselves by the N-word, the white society's social capital and social dominance over us will remain intact. By calling ourselves by the N-word, many of us are in fact participating in our own subjugation. I will not sit silently and idly in the face of such profound ignorance. True black liberation begins by learning the social sciences of how narrative shapes society. Most people don't understand the godlike power held by those who control the narratives. More specifically, how those who control the narrative that are fed into a society are able to shape society in ways that empowers themselves and in ways that facilitates their subjugation of targeted populations. A social science fact is that all societies function based upon the narrative that are repetitively fed into society. It doesn't matter if the narratives are untrue. All that matters is that the public believes that the narratives are true. Because the white ruling class controls all of the narratives that are repetitively fed into our society, they therefore literally owns the interpretation of reality. They've exploited this immense position of power to misshape the society in ways that empowers themselves and in ways that facilitates their ongoing subjugation of black people. Here's an example that provides a better clarity of how the white society steers society through false narratives. Imagine a scenario where of which history's proven worst criminals are the ones that are writing all the narratives. Rather than dealing with the inherent challenges of trying to maintain their social dominance based upon an accurate interpretation of their evil history, they instead create false narrative that falsely exonerates and exalts their racial groups and then imposes those false narratives upon society. After having stolen a people's land, those criminals could create false narratives that they merely settle upon land that they were entitled to. These criminals, after kidnapping and enslaving millions of people, they could create the narrative that they merely purchased those people and by enslaving them, provided them with a better life. These criminals could also create the narrative that God is of their racial group, which conveys the subliminal message that their racial group is closer to God and is therefore superior. These criminals could then impose these false narratives upon the society. By imposing all of these false narratives upon the society, they've created a false perception of reality that aids them in maintaining their power, because society functions based upon these narratives. It doesn't matter that the narratives are untrue. Most people within the society will behave accordingly to those false narratives because they've all repetitively received the same narratives. These criminals can also create false narratives that facilitates their subjugation of the oppressed. They could create narrative that vilifies the oppressed in order to falsely justify their mistreatments of them. They could dehumanize the oppressed in order to make others insensitive to their plight. It's actually a propaganda tactic known as manufactured consent to mistreat. This is literally how the white society functions. This is also the hidden reality of what the white society has done to black people. It's the truth of our plight and condition. It is time to elevate your minds and learn the truth. One love and peace.